The slap came so suddenly that for a brief, unreal moment, no one in the courtroom believed it had actually happened. A sharp sound cut through the air. Papers shifted on the bench. A woman in a pearl, white blazer stood there, breathing hard, her hands still partly raised, her face tight with a kind of anger usually kept behind closed doors, not displayed in public. But this wasn't a private space. This was a courtroom. And the person she had just struck wasn't a neighbor or a fellow board member. It was Judge Judy's daughter. Everything stopped. The bailiff reacted first, stepping forward, arm already extending. But Judge Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't move suddenly. She didn't even stand. She simply lifted one hand, and the entire room stilled as if pulled into place. Her daughter's cheek had already flushed pink. The HOA president, Denise Halbrook, known in her gated community as someone who could fine you for flower pots and smile while doing it, seemed to grasp, all at once, what she had done. But the moment had passed. The sound of the slap still lingered in the air like something fragile and shattered. Judge Judy fixed her gaze on Denise for several long seconds. When she finally spoke, her tone was quiet, but colder than anyone expected. "Sit down." Denise didn't respond. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "If the bailiff has to put you in that chair, you won't like how that ends." Denise sat. Judge Judy turned toward her daughter. "Are you all right?" Her daughter touched her face briefly, more startled than hurt, then lowered her hand. There was no panic, no tears, just a calm that comes when shock and clarity arrive together. "Yes," she said. "Do you want to continue?" The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The question itself felt unbelievable. Judge Judy's daughter inhaled, steadying herself, then looked directly at the woman who had struck her. "Yes," she answered quietly. Because if she could do that to me here, in front of cameras, in front of a judge, imagine what she believed she could do to people who had no one watching. That was the turning point. The slap wasn't the peak. It was the beginning. 27 minutes earlier, when Denise Halbrook first entered the courtroom, everyone thought they already understood the case. She wore a tailored white blazer, diamond earrings, and a perfectly practiced smile. Her heels echoed with confidence, and she carried a leather folder as if she were stepping into a meeting she already controlled. The kind of person who corrected strangers for small things. The kind who said community standards, with the same tone others use for serious warnings. At the plaintiff's table sat Evelyn Parker, 68 years old, slightly hunched, her hands gripping a worn folder, carefully kept but far from stylish. Beside her was her grandson, Lucas, a 16-year-old with restless hands and tired eyes. His leg bounced under the table until he caught his grandmother's glance and forced himself to stop. The dark circles under his eyes told their own story. One of sleepless nights in a home that no longer felt safe. Behind them sat Rachel, Judge Judy's daughter, composed in a navy suit with a legal pad resting on her lap. She wasn't acting as an attorney. She hadn't been invited because of her mother. She was there because she worked with a housing rights non-profit and had been the only person to respond when Evelyn's situation began spiraling. Ignored emails, unanswered calls, and a growing pattern of pressure from the OA. Denise didn't seem impressed. If anything, she looked mildly entertained. Judge Judy glanced over the case file and began reading in her crisp, precise tone. "Evelyn Parker is suing Denise Halbrook, president of the Willow Glen Homeowners Association, for wrongful towing, selective enforcement, property damage, emotional distress, and harassment. Halbrook has filed a countersuit for unpaid dues, reputational damage, and what she describes as malicious disruption of community governance." Judge Judy looked up. "That last phrase is ridiculous," she said plainly. "But I'm willing to hear just how ridiculous." A soft ripple of laughter moved through the room. Denise remained serious, sitting even straighter. "Your Honor," she began smoothly, "this is a matter of maintaining order. Communities function because rules are followed. Ms. Parker has repeatedly violated HOA policies, refused to pay fines, encouraged hostility toward the board, and attempted to use personal circumstances as an excuse to avoid rules that apply to everyone." Judge Judy's eyes narrowed slightly as Denise opened her folder and began listing violations with practiced speed. Unauthorized exterior changes, blocking shared driveways, unapproved signage in windows, failure to remove mobility equipment from shared spaces, unregistered animal activity, intimidation of the board, and non-compliance with landscaping requirements. The list was so long and delivered so mechanically that even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. Judge Judy turned to Evelyn. "You blocked shared drive lanes." Evelyn's voice was quiet, but steady. "No, ma'am. That was my late husband's van. It has a lift. We parked in the handicapped space assigned to us." Judge Judy looked back at Denise. "You had an issue with a handicapped van in a handicapped space. It wasn't always perfectly within the painted lines," Denise replied quickly. "And the vehicle's condition negatively affected the appearance of the neighborhood." Judge Judy blinked once. "Negatively affected the appearance," she repeated. Rachel, who had remained quiet until then, glanced down at her notes. Judge Judy noticed immediately. "You have something to add?" Rachel looked up. "Yes. I have photographs from the day the van was towed. It was parked within the designated space. The line next to it had faded, and the HOA hadn't repainted it despite multiple requests." Denise shifted slightly in her chair and gave a thin, controlled smile, the kind people use when they think politeness can mask irritation. "And this information is coming from my daughter," Judge Judy said before Rachel could respond. For a split second, Denise's composure slipped. It was brief but noticeable. Then she quickly recovered, letting out a short, brittle laugh. "How convenient." Judge Judy's expression didn't change. "What, exactly, is convenient?" "That your daughter just happens to be involved in a case in your courtroom." The atmosphere tightened instantly. Evelyn looked uneasy. Lucas dropped his gaze to the table. Rachel remained completely still. Judge Judy replied evenly, as if stating something obvious. "My daughter is not the plaintiff. She is not acting as counsel. She is a witness. If you have proof of wrongdoing, present it. If you're trying to create doubt because you don't like how it looks, that won't go far here." Denise smiled again, though it lacked the same confidence. "I'm simply pointing out that some people are used to certain advantages." Judge Judy leaned back slightly. "Mems Halbrook in my courtroom. The only people who get special treatment are liars, and I deal with them quickly." A quiet reaction moved through the room. Denise's grip tightened around her folder. Judge Judy turned to Evelyn. "Start from the beginning. Not the emotional version, the factual one." Evelyn took a breath that wavered midway. "My husband passed away 3 years ago. After that, it was just me and Lucas. He's my grandson. My daughter died before my husband, so it's been the two of us for a while. My husband bought that condo 30 years ago. It's all we have left of him." Lucas looked away. It was clear he had heard those words before, but they hadn't lost their weight. Evelyn continued. "At first, the HOA was normal, sometimes frustrating but manageable. Then Denise became president. That's when the notices started. First about the van, then the ramp, then the flower pots, then a complaint about Lucas's window sign." Judge Judy looked up. "Window sign." Lucas spoke this time, his voice slightly unsteady. It said, "Quiet, please. Exam week." Judge Judy turned to Denise. "That was considered a violation. Temporary signage isn't allowed," Denise replied. Judge Judy stared at her. "You fined a child over a sign about exams." It wasn't about the message. It was about consistency. Rachel quietly wrote something down. Denise noticed. Then Evelyn said something that shifted the entire case. "It got worse after Denise asked if I had ever thought about selling." Judge Judy's attention sharpened. "When was that?" "The first time was about 8 months after my husband passed. She said the neighborhood was changing, that expectations were higher, and that maybe a quieter place would suit me better." "And your response?" I said no. "What happened after that?" Evelyn looked down at her folder, then raised her head again. This time, her voice carried more strength. "The fines increased, a lot. That landed heavily." Judge Judy turned to Denise. "Did you suggest purchasing the plaintiff's condo?" Denise answered calmly. "I mentioned that downsizing might make things easier for her. That's not illegal. People make suggestions." Judge Judy's tone cooled further. "Suggestions that come alongside increasing fines tend to raise questions." Denise lifted her chin. "The fines were based on violations." Rachel spoke quietly. "Selective violations." Judge Judy nodded slightly. "We'll get there." Evelyn opened her folder and handed over photographs, letters, and a detailed timeline. Even just the dates told a troubling story. Warnings issued on holidays, fines applied less than a day later, late fees stacked onto disputed charges. One notice stood out. Improper exterior mobility apparatus. It referred to a folding medical chair that had been left outside for about 15 minutes after Lucas helped his grandmother inside during a dizzy spell. Judge Judy read that notice twice. "What exactly is an improper exterior mobility apparatus?" Evelyn answered softly. "My late husband's chair." The room shifted. "How long was it outside?" "Maybe 15 minutes. Judge Judy looked directly at Denise. "You fined a widow over her late husband's chair while she was unwell." Denise crossed her arms. "Rules are meant to be applied equally." Rachel spoke again, calm but firm. "They weren't." Judge Judy looked toward her. "Go on." Rachel slid a set of color photographs forward. Same week, same building. Other residents had scooters, decorative benches, storage bins outside, oversized plants, even portable generators after a storm. None of them was cited. Only Ms. Parker's chair was. Judge Judy examined the images carefully. "How do you know when these were taken?" "They're time-stamped. I took them myself." "Why were you there?" Rachel answered simply. "Because Ms. Parker contacted our office after receiving a notice that the HOA intended to place a line on her unit over unpaid fines. She didn't understand the notices, and no one had helped her. I went to see the situation in person." Denise gave a small, mocking smile. So you went looking for a cause? Rachel met her gaze without hesitation. I went looking for facts. You just didn't expect anyone to check. The room fell quiet again, but this time the silence carried weight. This was no longer just a routine HOA disagreement. There was something deeper underneath it. Judge Judy turned back to Evelyn. Tell me about the towing. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly against her folder. It happened in January. We woke up and the van was gone. What reason did they give? They said it was abandoned, that the community clearance tag had expired. Judge Judy looked at Denise. The vehicle had handicap plates. Yes, but the community requires. I didn't ask about your stickers. Judge Judy interrupted. I asked if it had handicap plates.
Yes.
And you still had it towed. The tag had expired. Rachel handed up another document. The renewal form was submitted 3 weeks earlier. The HOA cashed the check but never issued the new tag. Judge Judy flipped through the pages. Do you have proof the check was processed? Rachel nodded. Front and back. Judge Judy reviewed it, then slowly raised her eyes to Denise. Your office accepted payment, failed to issue the tag, and then had the vehicle removed for not displaying it. Denise answered quickly. That was an administrative oversight. Rachel's tone remained steady. The tow happened the morning after Ms. Parker declined a second suggestion to sell her condo. The statement landed heavily. Judge Judy turned to Evelyn. Is that correct? Evelyn nodded. Yes, ma'am. Denise came by the evening before. She said I looked tired. She mentioned a couple from Scottsdale who might be interested in my unit if I ever became realistic. Lucas looked at Denise then, his expression sharp and unfiltered. The intensity of it made several people in the room shift uneasily. It wasn't just anger, it was something deeper built over time. Judge Judy noticed. What impact did the towing have? Lucas spoke before his grandmother could. My grandmother missed a cardiology appointment. I missed school because I had to help her make calls. The tow yard wanted $80.60. We didn't have that kind of money. Judge Judy turned sharply toward Denise. $80.60. Denise straightened. The HOA doesn't control tow yard pricing. No, Judge Judy replied. You just set the situation in motion. Lucas's jaw tightened. And then we got another notice because the van wasn't there anymore. They said we changed our parking status without approval. Even Judge Judy paused at that. Is that accurate? Rachel handed over the notice. It's in the record. Judge Judy read it aloud, letting the words speak for themselves. Vehicle absent from assigned stall without updated occupancy notation may indicate unauthorized storage transfer. She looked up slowly. You fined them for not having the vehicle after you had it removed. Denise didn't respond immediately, but her breathing had become more noticeable. That was an automated notice. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. Then your system is flawed, and you approved it. A ripple of restrained reaction moved through the room. Rachel placed additional documents forward. There's more related to the lion. Judge Judy nodded. Go ahead. The HOA ledger shows several charges labeled legal review and executive compliance cost recovery, added to Ms. Parker's balance before any board vote approved them. Denise turned sharply. That information is confidential. Not after you billed it to the homeowner. Rachel replied calmly. Judge Judy studied the ledger. When was the board vote? Evelyn answered quietly. There wasn't one. At least none that I was told about. Rachel slid forward copies of meeting records. That's because some of these minutes were altered afterward. Denise's expression hardened immediately. That is a serious accusation. Judge Judy lifted the documents and examined them closely. Explain why these meeting minutes have different timestamps, inconsistent fonts, and a board secretary's signature that doesn't match the earlier pages. Denise opened her mouth, hesitated, then tried again. The board secretary was under a lot of pressure. Judge Judy leaned back slightly. Apparently, so was her handwriting. A quiet ripple moved through the room. Then Rachel spoke again. There's also video. That caught Denise's attention in a way nothing else had. Not quite fear, but something close to recognition. Judge Judy noticed the shift. Video of what? An HOA hearing held at the community clubhouse about 6 weeks before the lion notice. Parker was given 3 minutes to speak about disputed fines. I was there with her as a housing advocate. Judge Judy glanced briefly at Denise. And, she prompted. Rachel continued. Ms. Halbrook cut off Ms. Parker's microphone 38 seconds into her statement. When Lucas tried to speak, she threatened to call security. Lucas lowered his gaze, his jaw tightening. Judge Judy looked at him. Why were you trying to speak? He swallowed. Because my grandmother started shaking. The simplicity of that answer landed harder than anything else that had been said. Judge Judy turned back to Rachel. Let me see the video. Rachel handed over her phone along with a printed transcript. The bailiff brought the device up to the bench. Everyone in the courtroom watched Judge Judy's expression as she first viewed the footage silently. Denise sat stiffly, staring straight ahead. Evelyn twisted a tissue in her hands. Lucas kept his eyes on the floor. Then Judge Judy said, "Play the audio." Evelyn's voice filled the room, soft, unsteady, explaining that some of the fines had been issued while she was away attending her sister's funeral. Then Denise's voice cut through it sharply. "Excuses do not suspend community expectations." Evelyn tried to continue, but the microphone went dead. In the video, Lucas's chair scraped as he stood halfway up. "You're not letting her talk," he said. Denise's voice snapped back. "Sit down before you make this worse." The courtroom felt colder. Lucas, sitting there now, had gone pale just hearing it again. Then another moment appeared in the footage. Rachel stepped into frame, calm, composed, identifying herself as a housing advocate and asking that the hearing follow the board's own rules for speaking time. Denise's reaction in the video was immediate and dismissive. "This is a private community matter. We don't need outsiders telling residents how to act like victims." The audio ended. Judge Judy set the phone down slowly. "That was you." Denise made one last attempt to deflect. "The video doesn't show the full context." Judge Judy's voice flattened. "Everything seems to lack context when it reflects poorly on you." Then the bailiff called the next witness, the Hoey's former board treasurer, Martin Clean. A thin man in his late 50s, he carried the uneasy look of someone who had spent a long time deciding whether to speak up. He was sworn in. Judge Judy wasted no time. "Were these meeting minutes altered?" Martin swallowed. "Yes." The room reacted immediately. Denise half rose from her seat. "That's not true." Judge Judy didn't even glance at her. "Sit." Denise sat back down. Judge Judy kept her focus on Martin, who altered them. He hesitated, glanced once at Denise, then looked away. "She told me to revise them to reflect approvals that hadn't actually happened yet." "Why?" "Because she said if the paperwork didn't match, collections would be delayed." "Collections of what?" "Fines, late fees, line preparation charges." Judge Judy's expression hardened. "Were those charges legitimate?" Martin hesitated too long. "Answer the question." "Not all of them." "Which ones weren't?" "Some of the legal review charges weren't real reviews. They were placeholders." The courtroom went completely still. "Placeholders for what?" Judge Judy asked. Martin took a shaky breath. "For pressure." That single word shifted everything again. Judge Judy turned slowly toward Denise. "Pressure to do what?" Before Denise could answer, Martin spoke again. "To make Ms. Parker sell." Denise stood up abruptly. "He's lying." He was removed from the board. Martin turned toward her, and for the first time there was clear anger in his expression. "I resigned because you forged my approval on a reserve fund transfer." The entire room leaned forward. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "A reserve fund transfer." Rachel quickly passed a set of bank statements to the bailiff, almost before the judge finished speaking. "Yes." The transfer went to Blue Cedar Grounds. Judge Judy examined the document. "A landscaping vendor." Martin let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "That's what she claimed." "And what was it actually?" Martin glanced at Denise, then back at the bench. "It's her brother-in-law's company. There was no landscaping done that month." The composure had drained from Denise's face. She no longer looked controlled and polished, more like someone realizing that every safeguard she relied on had quietly failed. Judge Judy continued. "How much money was transferred?" $7,200. "For what purpose?" "Listed as emergency drainage repairs." Rachel stepped forward with photographs. "There was no drainage work, but there was a private patio renovation at Ms. Halbrook's home that same month, completed by a contractor affiliated with Blue Cedar." Denise's lips parted, then pressed together again. "That's defamatory." Judge Judy didn't react. "Defamation requires something untrue. I'm still waiting." Martin continued, his voice gaining momentum now that he had started. "She also talked about a redevelopment group, a potential buyer. She said older residents on fixed incomes would be more likely to sell after repeated enforcement pressure." Evelyn's face crumpled, not from surprise, but from the weight of hearing her fears confirmed. Judge Judy asked, "Was Miss Parker's unit specifically discussed?" Martin nodded several times. "Corner unit near the entrance. High resale potential if turned over quickly." Lucas looked pale. Rachel remained still, though her pen had stopped moving entirely. Judge Judy turned to Denise. "Would you like to explain why your treasurer's testimony, your financial records, your altered minutes, and your enforcement actions all point in the same direction?" Denise leaned forward, her tone now sharp and stripped of any earlier polish. "Yes, because people like her break rules, face consequences, and then go looking for someone to blame." A quiet wave of shock moved through the room. Judge Judy's eyes hardened. "You may want to think before you continue speaking." But Denise pushed on. "She acts weak when it benefits her." She snapped, pointing toward Evelyn. "And that boy sits there like he's been wronged over simple parking rules." Lucas flinched upright. Evelyn reached out, gripping his arm. People like this drain communities. Denise continued. They expect exception sympathy and everyone else to carry them. Rachel rose slightly from her seat, her voice calm but firm. Miss Halbrook, stop. The word cut through the room, not loud but steady. Denise turned to her with open disdain. You don't get to tell me what to do. Rachel stood fully now. It stopped being just your business the moment you used your position to intimidate a widow. That was the breaking point. Something in Denise's expression shifted. She stepped forward quickly, closing the space between them before the bailiff could fully react. Her hand came up and struck Rachel across the face. Papers scattered. Evelyn gasped. Lucas shoved his chair back hard enough that it hit the wall. The room froze again around the echo of that single action. Rachel didn't cry. Judge Judy didn't raise her voice. Denise sat down only because she was told to. Rachel steadied herself, her cheek flushed, and chose to continue. The bailiff asked if she needed medical help. She declined. Judge Judy asked if she wanted to stop the proceedings. No. Denise looked almost unsettled by that response, as if she had expected disruption to interrupt everything that had been building against her. But Rachel remained standing and said quietly, "If she would do that to me here, in front of all of you, imagine how safe Ms. Parker felt when no one was watching." Judge Judy closed her eyes briefly, just for a moment, then opened them again, her expression colder than before. "Proceed." Rachel picked up the final page from her notes. "There's one more document." Judge Judy nodded. "Let's see it." Rachel handed it up through the bailiff. "It's an email exchange between Ms. Halbrook and a real estate acquisition consultant." Denise's face went pale. Judge Judy scanned the page. "This came from your personal email." Denise said nothing. Judge Judy began reading aloud. "Corner units with long-term owners are easier to acquire if fines are layered before market contact. Emotional exhaustion tends to shrink the space for negotiation." No one in the room moved. Judge Judy continued. "Parker in Building C carries herself with pride, but she's drowning. And when that happens, timing becomes everything." Evelyn let out a sound then. Not quite a sob, not entirely anything definable. More like the body's final attempt to push back against humiliation after being forced to endure too much of it. Lucas gently placed an arm around her shoulders. Judge Judy's expression sharpened, precise and cutting. "You weren't upholding rules," she said to Denise. "You were orchestrating submission." Denise attempted to cry, but it came too late. Dry, unconvincing. "You don't understand what it takes to maintain standards." Judge Judy responded without hesitation. "Standards do not require fabricated meeting records, false legal charges, retaliatory towing, or physical aggression." Then something unexpected shifted the room. Lucas, who had said very little until now, reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Evelyn looked at him, surprised. "Lucas." He shook his head slightly. "No, she needs to hear this." Judge Judy turned her attention to him. "What is it?" He held the paper up with trembling hands. "I wrote this the night they posted the Leon notice." Her voice softened just slightly. "Go on." "My grandmother had fallen asleep in her chair. I didn't want to wake her." He unfolded the page. The handwriting was uneven. Too large in places, cramped in others. Each line pressed into the paper as if carrying more weight than it should. "Read it," Judge Judy said. Lucas nodded. His voice shook at first, then steadied in that strange way voices do when fear gives way to purpose. "Things we lose if we lose the condo, Grandpa's chair. The wall where he marked my height every birthday. The kitchen where Grandma still makes his soup when she misses him. The parking spot where the van used to be. My room. Her medicine drawer. The plant outside the window she says he planted crooked. The only address my mom ever sent me birthday cards to. The place that still feels like family." The silence in the room deepened. This wasn't spectacle anymore, it was testimony. Lucas continued. "I don't think people like Denise understand that homes are built from ordinary things. Drawers, light switches, routines. But if she keeps doing this, one day we'll leave, and she'll think she just enforced a rule." He stopped. His hands trembled too much to hold the paper steady. Judge Judy lowered her gaze for a moment, then looked back up. Rachel's expression had softened after the earlier tension, but there was strength in it now. Denise, on the other hand, seemed to shrink inside her own polished appearance. Judge Judy asked quietly, "Who told you to write that?" "No one." "Why did you?" "Because I wanted to remember what mattered in case she won." Even the bailiff turned his eyes away. Judge Judy faced Denise again. "You heard him," Denise replied, her voice small and dismissive. "Kids exaggerate." It was the worst possible thing she could have said. Rachel spoke, her voice steady despite everything. "That's what you rely on. That people will call pain drama, when it comes from someone with less power." But Judge Judy didn't interrupt. Her silence carried agreement. Then the tow company's operations manager was called in. He looked irritated to be there, but not willing to lie for someone else's authority. He confirmed the Tao request had been marked as a priority. Immediate action. No courtesy knock. Who made the request? Judge Judy asked. Ms. Halbrook's office. Any notes? Yes. Honor resistant. Do not discuss payment alternatives on site. Judge Judy turned to Denise. Why honor resistant? Denise lifted her chin. She had a pattern of non-compliance. Evelyn let out a short, broken laugh, more disbelief than humor. Rachel submitted another photo. This was taken the morning after the tow. The faded parking line was visible, along with the handicap placard on the windshield. Judge Judy studied it closely. You had a medically adapted vehicle removed from a barely visible handicapped space after accepting a renewal payment. Denise said nothing. Then came one final revelation. Martin, the former treasurer, asked to speak. Judge Judy allowed it. There was a board meeting after the tow, he said. Off the record, Denise said if Parker pushed back, they'd go after her with architectural violations next. She said widows tend to break once they feel watched. The reaction in the room shifted sharper, colder. Financial misconduct angers people, but contempt like that chills them. Judge Judy held Denise's gaze for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, completely stripped of emotion. You are one of the most calculated tyrants I've seen in quite some time. Denise looked stunned, more shaken by being understood than by the words themselves. Judge Judy continued. You dressed exploitation up as policy. You used grief, age, financial limits, and a child's need for stability as tools. And when the evidence stopped favoring you, you lashed out at a witness right here in court. A witness who showed more composure after being struck than you've shown while being dishonest. But Rachel remained completely still. Evelyn looked almost dazed, as if she had spent so long being ignored that hearing someone in authority lay out the truth so plainly didn't quite feel real. Judge Judy glanced down at the file one last time. The countersuit is dismissed in full. Not just dismissed, but completely without merit. A quiet wave of relief moved through the gallery. She then turned to Evelyn. On the plaintiff's claim, judgment is awarded to Ms. Parker in the amount of 5,000, the maximum permitted by this court. Evelyn's lips parted, but no words came. Judge Judy raised a finger, signaling she wasn't finished. I am also issuing a formal referral regarding the financial inconsistencies, altered records, questions around reserve funds, and potential fraudulent enforcement practices to the appropriate authorities. I recommend an immediate audit of the HOA board's records. For the first time, real fear appeared on Denise's face. Judge Judy noticed. No, you're concerned. Denise tried to speak. Your Honor. No, Judge Judy cut in. Don't start asking for understanding now. You had no interest in fairness when you were placing liens on a widow over faded lines and temporary items. Then she turned toward Rachel. The entire room watched, not expecting favoritism, but expecting something human. Judge Judy studied the faint mark still visible on Rachel's cheek and asked quietly, Are you certain you're okay? Rachel gave a small nod. Judge Judy returned it, just as subtle, then faced Denise again. What happened to my daughter doesn't change the facts of this case. It only reveals your character more quickly. Denise seemed smaller now, the confidence she entered with completely gone. Rachel gathered her papers. Evelyn held onto Lucas's hand. Martin released a long breath like someone finally coming up for air. The Tao witness looked like he wanted to disappear. Then Judge Judy said the line no one would forget. There's a difference between protecting a community and preying on one. You crossed that boundary a long time ago. She tapped the gavel lightly. Parties are excused. But no one moved right away. The case didn't feel like something that could end cleanly with a sound and a ruling. Too much of it had lived in the quiet, ordinary parts of life. This wasn't just about penalties. It was about a home, its routines, its memories, its small, meaningful details. Parking spaces, medicine drawers, signs in windows, chairs left outside for a moment, an old van, a late husband's belongings, a child's room, a grandmother's daily rhythm. All of it had been disrupted and called management. Judge Judy noticed Lucas still holding the paper he had read. What will you do with the money? She asked Evelyn. Evelyn blinked, as if pulling herself back to the present. Catch up on bills, she said softly. Fix the van. Maybe repaint the handicap lines ourselves if the new board doesn't. A small, surprised laugh moved through the room, the first light sound all day. Lucas added quietly, and put the front door camera back. They made us remove it. Judge Judy nodded once. Put it back. Evelyn hesitated. Even if the board says. The board is about to have bigger concerns, Judge Judy said. Put it back. Rachel allowed herself a faint smile despite everything. Then Lucas spoke again, and this time the room shifted. I started thinking if someone like her disliked us that much, maybe we didn't belong there. Silence returned instantly. Judge Judy looked at him. Why would you think that? His answer came with unfiltered honesty, because people in charge act like they know something you don't. So after enough notices, Enough warnings, you start thinking maybe the problem is you. Like maybe your family is the kind others want gone. Evelyn closed her eyes. Rachel looked down. Judge Judy held his gaze for a moment before speaking. Listen carefully. Communities are not reserved for the comfortable, and a home is not a privilege limited to people who never inconvenience others. Lucas nodded, and for the first time that day, his legs seemed steady. As people began to stand, Denise rose more slowly now, stripped of the authority she had carried in. The bailiff instinctively stepped closer. She glanced toward Rachel, maybe expecting anger, maybe an apology, maybe something that would reset the moment. Rachel gave her none of that. You treated humiliation like it was leadership, she said simply. Denise looked away first. Only then did Judge Judy allow herself a quiet exhale, so subtle it might have gone unnoticed. But Rachel saw it. The bailiff noticed it first. Even Evelyn, halfway turned toward the easel, caught the shift in the judge's expression. It wasn't weakness. It was feeling. Despite years on the bench, despite the hardened perspective that comes from watching people twist small grievances into weapons day after day, something about Lucas's letter, Evelyn's wary posture, and that chilling phrase about widows breaking under pressure had struck a nerve Judge Judy didn't appreciate. Not because the legal questions were difficult. They weren't. The law here was straightforward. What unsettled her was how cruelty had been disguised as procedure. That more than chaos always provoked her. Out in the hallway, everything felt oddly normal. Bright overhead lights, quiet footsteps, people waiting with folders and envelopes, preparing for their own disputes. The world hadn't shifted just because one person's control had unraveled in public. But for Evelyn and Lucas it had. The air felt different. Not entirely secure, but lighter. Rachel stepped out behind them, holding her bag in one hand and pressing an ice pack gently to her cheek with the other. The bailiff had insisted. Lucas looked shaken again. "I'm sorry," he said. Rachel gave him a small, reassuring smile. "For what?" "She reacted because of us." Rachel shook her head. "No, she acted because of who she is. Don't mix those up." Evelyn's eyes filled, not with dramatic tears, but with the quiet exhaustion of someone who had endured too much for too long and was only now beginning to feel relief. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. Rachel answered just as gently. "By staying." Evelyn blinked. "What do you mean?" "By staying in your home if that's what you want. By repainting the lines. By putting the camera back. By not mistaking her hostility for authority." Lucas looked down at the paper still in his hand. "I think I want to tape this inside my closet." Rachel smiled. "Then do it." Down the hallway, Denise was being led out through another exit. But before disappearing, she paused and looked back. There was no apology in her expression. Not even full regret. Just a kind of disbelief, as if the system she had relied on for so long, titles, rules, official letters, quiet pressure, had failed to shield her from being seen clearly. For a moment, it seemed like she might say something, defend herself, offer an excuse, claim stress, misunderstanding, responsibility. But nothing came, because sometimes the truth lines up too cleanly for excuses to hold. She turned and walked away, the bailiff following behind. Lucas watched her go, then looked at Evelyn. "Do you think she still believes she was right?" Evelyn took her time before answering. "I think people like that understand when they lose. I'm not sure they ever understand when they've been cruel." Rachel didn't argue. A little later, after paperwork and signatures and all the routine steps that follow a court decision, Evelyn and Lucas stepped outside. The sunlight felt almost too bright after everything inside. Lucas paused on the steps, blinking in the light, then asked something so simple it nearly broke Evelyn. "Do you think the house will feel safe again?" Evelyn pressed her lips together. "I think it might take some time." Rachel stepped beside them. "That's okay," she said. "Safety usually comes back in quiet ways first." Lucas frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means the first signs are small. Making breakfast without worrying about a notice. Parking without that drop in your stomach. Sleeping through the night without expecting trouble. Putting something in your window just because you like it, not because it's allowed." Lucas held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "That actually sounds nice." Rachel smiled. After fear, ordinary things can feel pretty special. They started walking down the steps together, but halfway to the curb, Evelyn suddenly stopped. "I forgot something." Her voice carried that fragile mix of memory and emotion. She opened her bag, moved aside a stack of papers, and pulled out a small brass key, worn smooth with age. Lucas looked puzzled. "What's that?" Evelyn studied it before answering. "It's the key to your grandfather's workbench drawer. It's in the storage unit." Rachel waited quietly. "I haven't opened it since he passed." Evelyn continued. "There were always threats about storage violations, and every time I thought about going through his tools, I just couldn't. It felt like opening that drawer meant accepting we might lose everything else too." Lucas looked at the key, then back at her. "Can we open it this weekend?" Evelyn nodded once, tears finally slipping free. Yes. And somehow that moment, not the confrontation, not the ruling, not the paperwork, became the real ending of the day. Because that's what had truly been under attack all along. Not rules or parking lines, but memory, routine, belonging, the quiet invisible ties that connect people to the ones they've lost and turn a space into a home. Back in chambers, Judge Judy never saw what happened on those courthouse steps. But in her own way, she had already felt it. Rachel returned briefly to retrieve a folder she had left behind. Judge Judy glanced up as her daughter entered. "You should have ducked," she said dryly. Rachel let out a small, almost amused breath. "That's your version of concern. Mine would be slightly more helpful." She touched her cheek lightly. "I'm fine." Judge Judy studied her for a moment longer than necessary, then looked away and began straightening papers on her desk. "She's not what got to me?" she said. Rachel's tone softened. "I know, it was the boy, I know," Judge Judy replied, tapping Lucas's handwritten page against the desk. "There's a specific kind of damage in people who use rules as weapons against grief," she said. Rachel nodded slowly. "That's why it escalated. Every time no one intervened, it started to feel justified, like paperwork made it right." Judge Judy gave a faint, cold smile. "Well, it doesn't look so clean anymore." Rachel gathered her things. At the door, she paused. "You know what bothered her most?" she asked. Judge Judy looked up. "Not losing," Rachel answered herself. "Being accurately described." Judge Judy leaned back. "That's usually what they can't tolerate." Rachel left, and the door closed behind her. For a brief moment, the courtroom returned to something ordinary. Wood, paper, light. But some cases don't really end when people leave. They linger, like residue or reflection. Because what happened here wasn't just an HOA dispute collapsing. It was something bigger. The quiet power that grows in small systems. The power of minor rules, small penalties, official notices, and procedural language that doesn't look harmful on its own. But in the wrong hands, those small tools can reshape lives. They can make a widow anxious to check her own mailbox. They can make a teenager feel like his family doesn't belong anywhere. They can slowly turn a home into something uncertain. Denise Halbrook had believed that because her methods were subtle, they were harmless. That was her mistake. Small-scale authority still leaves a trail. And when it's examined closely, especially by someone like Judge Judy, the illusion rarely survives. By the end of the day, word of the courtroom moment would spread farther than Denise ever intended. Not because people chase scandal, but because they recognize patterns. They recognize the polished official who hides pressure behind procedure. The neighbor who smiles in meetings but intimidates in writing. The widow told she's difficult for wanting to remain in the home tied to her life. The child who learns that authority figures with paperwork can make stability feel temporary. But what people would remember most wasn't the confrontation itself. They would remember Lucas's words. The list of ordinary things that make a home. Routines, drawers, lights, habits, and how easily those things can be threatened. They would remember Rachel standing after being struck and refusing to let chaos rewrite the moment. And they would remember Judge Judy's final judgment, which stripped away every layer of image Denise had built around herself. There is a difference between maintaining a community and consuming one. That was the real turning point. Not the slap, not the verdict, but the exposure. Because once the system she relied on was seen clearly, it stopped feeling powerful at all.